briefly, OpenVino is a platform I've been working on for almost 8 years. We're focused on tokenization of wine, traceability, which we call vine, wine, dine, mine, going from the wine producer to the end consumer. And today we're focusing on the transparency aspect. I'm in Mendoza, Argentina. I'm a winemaker as well. But this is a ecosystem of some approximately 70,000 wineries worldwide, producing upwards of 30 billion bottles a year. So it's a big deal. And basically our transparency element, which we'll focus on, it was what we're calling biodigital certification. And this is something we've been developing with Kleros over the past 2 years. And now I'll give you some updates on where we are now. We're about to launch some of our first 10 wineries with this next in 3 weeks and on March 15th. So let's talk about the problem. Consumers value authenticity, meaning that more and more, all the products that we're looking at in the world, we're finding lots of stickers and labels and certifications. You know, is this organic? Is it sustainable? Is it vegan, kosher? These types of things. But also, in the case of wine, it goes a step further because we want to know, is this a Malbec from Mendoza, from Luján de Cuyo? Was it oaked? Was it from this particular producer? Is it single vineyard? There's a whole list of attributes that wineries use to distinguish their product from these other 70,000 wineries, right? Defining where it's actually from. So there's a lot of important things here, and there's a lot of confusion to consumers in actually what these things mean. The current system is that in most cases for certification, a wine producer like myself, I would hire a third-party auditor to come and check my processes and say, if we're taking the example of organic, right? We go through a process and they say if I'm organic or not. The problem is that this system is completely dysfunctional for a few reasons. It costs money for me to certify the wine, and that increases the expense of the wine, and it makes me less competitive, and it doesn't make the wine taste any better, right? And so that's already one impediment from trying to get people to certify for certain things. And we want people to be more sustainable and more ethical and all these other things, so that's a problem. But the biggest problem, I think, is that if I'm hiring a third-party auditor, I'm their customer. So they want to give me a yes. If for whatever reason they're not certifying me, then they're losing me as a customer for next year, right? And they also want to spend as little time as possible in the certification. The certification is quite different from what most people imagine, and that it's usually a paperwork audit, and so it's quite easy to cheat if I want to. And at the end of the day, customers really don't know what this means. They see the label on the back of the bottle, but they don't really know what it means, and they have no way to validate it. So this is basically a very simple way to resolve this. First, we define what does organic mean. This breaks down to some 27 types of rules. These are rules that are already regulated. They differ slightly from different jurisdictions. So the EU and the US and Japan and Argentina might be slightly different, but they're more or less the same. We give the producer a mechanism to report their evidence using IoT sensors, using cameras, using documents, using work logs, using different types of tools that they can store their evidence on an immutable blockchain or using IPFS or some of these tools. And then the last step, the most important one, is the challenger bounty, where basically we'll have the winery block a certain amount of funds with Kleros we're looking at a 30-day period and saying, as anyone wants to challenge us, a challenger can also put money into the bounty, upload their reason to explain why I'm cheating, and then this goes to the Kleros court. So very in line with what we've already seen. So let me just show you quickly. This is kind of how the process works. We have biodigital certification, where basically we're explaining what this is, what the different types of certificates are, and this 3-step process, and what types of artifacts that a winery might be able to provide, and what kind of backend would this be, right? So breaking it down into the different types of questions. A winery that wants to certify their wine as one of these different certificates, for example, organic, would basically go through a form. This is a form providing text, uploading documents, but also connecting to an API for sensors, for camera data, for different types of information, providing all the information about where this grapes were grown, how the wine was made, and falling into the rules that are existing with organics, right? We've added a few things. We've streamlined a lot of things that are already existing. But this is basically the process that they will do. Now, this is against a token. So because we're tokenizing wine, if we're saying there's 10,250 bottles that were produced of a specific vintage, for example, my wine from 2018, then we would have to certify that token and go through the process that Fede described earlier in a curated token, right? So that's in a nutshell how OpenVino works. I wanted to share one last element that we've added recently, which I think is kind of interesting. And it has to do with one of the processes or one of the issues here, which is our goal obviously is transparency. We want to eliminate the cost for certification for a winery, and we want to provide them more tools to communicate to their customers exactly what they're doing. That's the goal. But there might be certain things that a winery needs to certify that they don't want to make public. And I give an example here of a chemical analysis of wine. So one of the 27 things that we certify as a wine is a chemical analysis. And this has to be done whether it's organic or not. Here in Argentina, I do a chemical analysis of the wine that's submitted to the National Wine Board, and they say, yep, it's good to drink. They don't say if it's organic or not. That's not their role. But this chemical analysis has like how much alcohol and the pH and different aspects, but it also tests things like how many trace amounts of these heavy metals are in wine. Now, you might not know this, but all wines, in fact, almost all food products have some tiny amount of these different components, these different elements, right? It's just unavoidable. It's nothing to, it's not harmful as long as it's with a certain threshold. This is just how chemistry and food works. But the winery might not want to publish and say, hey, by the way, did you know your wine has a tiny amount of lead? So what we've done is, let me get my screen back. We've created a mechanism where the winery, and here in this case we have Bob's Winery, is reporting to the National Wine Board, as they have to do anyway. This is in clear text, and this is a private setup. None of this information is public. They publish their wine analysis to the innovate, to the wine board. From that, we have them, the wine board publishes a hash of this information onto a blockchain. Here we're using ZK Sync, but any public chain would work. They're publishing a hash of those analysis. The next step is they're going to OpenVino, and they're going to publish the same information to us, but we're using a fully homomorphic encryption and a zero knowledge proof, such that the actual data that they send us can be encrypted and hidden. In other words, we don't actually see the information. We only know two things. We know it's below a certain threshold with the zero knowledge proof, and we can also generate a hash and compare it to the wine board's hash and say, well, I don't know what information you sent us. It's acceptable for organic. And if you're lying to us, you also lied to the government regulator, right? And then we can issue the digital certificate. So in a sense, to summarize that, we have this process where we've created this backend for the National Wine Board. A winery would register here. Then they would come to OpenVino, register the same information. They can decide which of these they want to make private that we don't actually see with the fully homomorphic encryption. And after we can compare these two hashes, and this is all completely done on chain, then in the back end, we'll be able to say, is this the same? Okay, this analysis is acceptable. We don't know what the data is. It's below a certain thing, and now we can issue a biodigital certification. So that's how biodigital certification works, adding these different aspects. This is a completely open platform. It's open source, and we're 100% focused on wine, but working with others and use this for, I think there's a lot of use cases. And definitely this fits in with token curation as Federico described from the beginning. So thanks a lot.